Otutuoma ehihioma ona kachifo. Welcome to the Climate Action Figures podcast. My name is Amara Uneli, and I am so happy to be a guest here today.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Climate Action Figures. My name, as always, is John Whiddon, and this week on the show, we are continuing our series featuring young guests who were involved in some way with COP29. Today, you get to meet Amara, who was involved in COP29 virtually, and she will tell us all about that. But first, this week's QuickFix, which comes from two of our guests last season, Sophia and her grandmother Bertha from Quebec. And they made a list of quick fixes together and shared this with us about travel. We walk or cycle if possible. We use the smallest vehicle we can. We organize errands to make one trip. We travel together when possible. And we turn off the engine when parked. So thank you very much to you, Bertha and Sophia, for sharing those. And welcome, Amara.
Hello, everyone. That quick fix was quite interesting, especially because we started doing that a long time ago in Lagos after fuel became a very scarce commodity. But it has been great, not only just saving our time, but also communicating and connecting with others under that shared goal of sustainability. Excited to be here, excited to see what we talk about today.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. And since we're on that topic about, you said Lagos in Nigeria, correct? And you are a student there, is that right? It looks like you're in a classroom in the background.
Yeah, I'm dialing in from my school.
Do you want to just tell us about that? What kind of school it is and what kind of education you're taking?
I'm right now in the ID program at Green Springs School. It's a 2-year program, right? Filling in with the American curriculum. But I study a lot of things surrounding my interests, which relates to public policy, international development, and of course, climate advocacy and environmental science. Figuring out how we can, heal the world and make it a better place, but just help out wherever we can.
Lofty goals, to be sure. And now you're in your final year of high school, is that right?
Yes, I'm a senior in high school in the American system, but I'm in my last year in IB.
Now, Amara, you were in on drafting policy, and so you attended COP29 in Baku virtually because of your school commitments there. Do you want to tell us a bit about that involvement?
Well, although I had anticipated going there, just circumstances arrived, I wasn't able to go. But despite that, I was able to really support all my different colleagues and our membership cohorts on ground. I'm a part of a few fellowships and just groups like the YOUNGO and the Shoka groups that were really active during COP29. So we all worked together to draft our global youth statement and really worked a lot on what we, the youth, wanted to advocate for and really push forward at this edition of COP. So that was a great experience, not only beforehand, but during, with all the different virtual events and different campaigns that went on. And also now, post-COP, we're still figuring out and getting our bearings after the conference to see how we can really push for whatever happened to still continue striving for our goals. So yeah, I was pretty active even though I was here in Lagos.
We'll get to some of those specific groups in just a moment. But before we do, in your mind, what was the most important thing for COP29 to address?
Honestly, to me, I do understand that people have different priorities, especially when you pertain like where you're coming from. You mentioned current climate crises and all of that. But I do definitely think a really important key is climate education and climate resilience, like how to build back after any climate disaster that happens all over the world now, not just in Lagos with our flood, but we're seeing happen in the US, in the Virgin Islands, and just all over the world. So just that support for local communities to really resist and also rebuild to ensure that they have climate resilience if things do come. And then that component of climate education, ensuring that we are, building the next generation of climate advocates who create those solutions that we need so that cycle can continue.
And do you feel that some of those were successfully addressed at COP29?
There were pledges made, which was a success if you look at it from an optimistic point of view. Pessimistic point of view might say otherwise, especially knowing that what is said does not always translate to what is done, especially with different bureaucracies and passing down to government level, state level, local level. like the effects or impacts can feel a bit watered down. But I do know that we have a lot of useful energy. So hopefully we can keep on pushing for and like really holding them accountable to what they have said they were going to do. So we're just equipping ourselves. But no, I don't think that everything that we have achieved was achieved, especially looking at things like COVID-19, where after the pandemic hit, all countries banded together and ensured that this virus was controlled and taken down. And if we really put that same energy, that same view into really fighting for climate change, we won't have seen what happened at COP29.
So, Amara, do you think COP29 is going to change things in the world, or do we need some other kind of vehicle to be the main way to address climate change?
I think there are both benefits and the limitations. The benefits is that it puts people in a space where they are forced to not only participate and tend to get over there, but there's as well as like that week or 2 weeks where they're head on okay, climate change is the priority to fix, is the main issue at hand. So just being there as a country, as private organizations, as youth NGOs is an important step in just like ensuring that people care about it. But then all these things can almost become talk shows that people come, they take pictures, they post on Instagram, which is okay now that knowing social media is a big push of information and advocacy. But I think it's really getting to that point where it's, I don't want to say propaganda, but it's really just a habitual, and it's not something that people are like, you need to be scared. You need to figure out that it's not just attending, it's life or death, you know? So just figuring out how we can ensure that what we are actually doing translates to action and how we measure that.
And if you were in charge, how would you design something? What's your perfect idea about how we could meet and discuss climate change? What would be different about that?
That's actually a very good question. Thinking right off the top of my head, I'm just looking at all the different China during the Mao Zedong leadership, how there were a lot of just state, local run like cohorts and getting everyone discussing, not just, you know, the higher upper classes, but everyone, that almost like root to like ground to forefront. So I would really like, hone in on the access we have right now to technology, to getting everyone out, to almost mandating it. Like everyone needs to have a passport. Everyone needs to be part of this country. You need to have taken a climate course. You need, that's like almost, you know, with a vaccine, with all those things. Another requirement is to get that climate education course. Another requirement maybe is to just like attend those meetings, have those pledges, almost like a utopia where everyone is coming together to fight this thing. Even if you do not strongly believe in it, or you don't want to study environmental science or international development in school, it's still something that is required. That is what I would do as a leader in this world, and hopefully it will come to pass someday.
Maybe we can look forward to that, hey? You mentioned whether people believe it really or not. What's the general feeling in Nigeria about climate change? And maybe you could comment from an adult perspective and from a youth perspective, and is there a big difference?
I would definitely say that, first of all, a huge difference with different intergenerational collaboration now, though. There is that growing understanding that climate change does exist. A year ago, 2 years ago, I would not be saying this, but I feel like not only has the media really put it at the forefront, so wherever in the world you are, we are a connected world. But there is that sense of almost belittling of the issue, knowing that there is so much going on socially, politically in our nation. A lot of people are struggling to even make ends meet. So when I talk about climate change in classes, or when I'm on my youth advocacy projects, what are on people's minds, especially when talking to the youth who are from disadvantaged communities, are, how am I going to get my next meal? How are my parents going to survive? Or even for the adults, they're thinking, how can I stay afloat? How can I feed my family? Lots of them want to leave the country. So it's not really a priority. And I do know that there is that very scary change shift in mindset where it's that I'm serving myself now. Like I need to ensure that I can live now. Why am I thinking about 100 years from now, what is going to happen? And even like all over the world, even in the Western world, with a lot of change in mindset, is that thing of like now. So I think that there is that sense of there was an urgency, and there is an urgency when you firsthand experience climate change and are aware of it. But there is still that lack of climate education. So the people who really experience the West, the farmers, the fishermen, everyone who lives in the East or in like areas that depend on agriculture, they don't know that it is really climate change. They just know it's bad weather. So there's those two components of a lack of climate education and lack of prioritization, which is both sad, but I understand where they're coming from because I know that I have a privilege of good education, so I can talk about climate change and want to solve it. But people don't even have the chance to start thinking about something that doesn't affect them now. They need to eat.
You're clearly very motivated in this regard. What inspired you to become so involved with this movement?
The motivation has definitely grown over time. So in the beginning, my home was flooded like when I was, I think, 12, 13, and we had to move out. And it was during quarantine, and I was very frustrated. And I didn't understand what was going on, and I felt like almost vulnerable. I didn't know that it was climate change. I didn't really care about it. But then I started hearing a lot. My parents are still in the agriculture industry. And so all the smallholder farmers that they were working with, they were talking about loss of yield, loss of profit. And I could see the wear that it was having on them. And just knowing that it does not only affect how pretty the world is, like with no forest. Because in Lagos, if you look back 40 years ago, we were full lush green forest. We have amazing biodiverse land, really great weather conditions. But now it's a city. I grew up in a concrete jungle. And I didn't really have access to spaces. But then when I traveled abroad, I would see this stark difference. I love nature. So those three components just came together. My want for more nature. And then my parents, just like the effect that it had on my family in both like emotional and like tangible ways. And I just, tried to be proactive and just started doing my thing. And here I am today.
Now, as you've become more involved, there are several groups you are connected with now. One is YOUNGO, you've mentioned. That's kind of a connection between you and our previous two guests. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about YOUNGO?
It's a community, like a global network of just activists and really impassioned youths who want to just influence and advocate for the international like climate change policy that they believe will benefit them in their future. We're all together working to shape the future we want to see. It's a great community. So some cohorts meet every week. So it's really subdivided into different cohorts, different communities. And I'm a contact point for the YOUNGO Arts, Culture, and Heritage Working Group. But I've been part of different ones like Sustainable Cities and the Climate Education Coalition, which have been great communities that I've worked in when I was attending COP27 and COP28. And even currently now, just sharing information and advice and mentorship. It's a great network to be part of. And it really just reinforces my love for this work that I'm currently doing.
Oh, that's great. And we'll put links to each of these organizations. So if our listeners and viewers want to learn more about these, you'll find those in the show notes. You are the founder of Preserve Our Roots, a youth-led organization that's focused on environmental education and climate action. How do the concepts of environmental education and climate action connect with that name, Preserve Our Roots? What are the roots and the connection there?
We were actually initially called Fight Global Warming Nigeria. I think that was the first year where I was just posting on Instagram, making videos, trying to write blogs, because I'm a creative at heart. So I was just trying to push out that message. But I think one thing that really struck me was that my grandfather, who's an Igwe in one of our villages, started talking to me about climate change and asking me to tell him about it. He had seen some videos my dad had sent to him and he was like, I want to learn more about this. And I actually helped him later on draft some policies that were passed in his villages to help with the climate resilience in the Anyamelu local community. And I realized how it was that intergenerational collaboration that really just powered climate advocacy and that shift towards sustainable, like a green earth, because we've only been in the world and existing for like a short span of time compared to how long this amazing blue earth that has existed. And so it's just like our roots are deeper than what we know or what is in history books. It gives a sense of responsibility. And I mean, my roots are really important to me, my heritage, my ancestors. So that type of thing of like what you're doing is not just for now or for your future. It's also like respecting your past and, honoring, preserve our roots. And that can come in different facilities. So you don't need to want to learn environmental science in school to really use your voice or your talent or your basketball skills to really advocate for climate change. So it calls for youth everywhere in Nigeria, West Africa, and even the world to use that talents that they currently have, their roots, to really just advocate for climate change any way that they can.
When we were talking before the podcast, you mentioned that your cultural roots are Igbo. And I wonder what connections you found between caring for the earth, mitigating climate change, and that Igbo culture.
I mean, that's a very interesting question. Also, understanding that, I mean, Lagos, where I live, is just a melting pot of all the different ethnic groups and cultures. And I think one thing that not only like connects my advocacy work to my roots and my culture, but connects all the different ethnic groups in Nigeria is that fact of sacredness and respect and honor that I was talking about before. 70 to 90% of our population are really just employed by that agrarian society, that sector. But another important thing is the fact that it has really been passed down from generation to generation. So even now, although I am not planning on studying agriculture, it is something that I'm aware of that has benefited my nation and my people. And especially knowing that we have all these different festivals and rituals and just sacred practices that center around that earth culture. One of my favorites is the New Yam Festival. And then just hearing all the different stories and the different like fables of how important it was, it just makes me see it in a different light where it's not just, where you're living right now, but it's that sort of like deeper connection that will make you more tied, more for feeling responsible for the work that you're doing. It gives me a sense of responsibility just past the climate advocacy work, because a lot of things that we do now as a society is disconnect ourselves from the climate crisis. I mean, we see it on TV, times on the news, we post about it, or we build our skyscrapers higher, raise our foundation so it doesn't get flooded. We can do all the things, use our technology to act like it does not exist. But if you know that there's something deeper, your roots, something pulling you to that willing responsibility, like you would care for your family, you would care for also the heritages that they brought up. And anytime I talk to my father about his experiences in Lagos before it was built into this concrete jungle, it makes me wish like I was born in the wrong generation. But I can really just, rebuild this nation. I know one thing that Preserve Our Roots and I am really working on is our first sustainable public park in Lagos. So hopefully that would be able to start, creating the future we want to see. That's something that really pulls me, is that like I need to preserve what my ancestors really built their lives on.
Congratulations on the first park. That's fantastic. Now, this ties right in with your deep engagement with Nature Fellowship, and I don't know much about that. Perhaps you could just share a little bit about that organization.
So it's called the Nature Fellowship Program, and it was really just built to support the development of like leadership among youth who are really just impassioned about environmental activism, helping them, providing that platform for us to advocate for our rights and get our voices heard. So it really just started this year, and it's actually a 2-year fellowship program in partnership with the Alana organization and Ashoka. So it's great. They helped us participate really actively in COP. And then there's some future ones that you can stay tuned for in the Bonn conference, the COP 30, and just different events. Really just having our youth team and our youth voice out. And it's a very small cohort of just, I think, 4 to 5 other young advocates and activists. But there are really amazing, amazing people who have done such great work with organizations from the United Nations to different governments all around the world. They've been cohorts, they've been youth workers for like the entire Gen Z, Gen Alpha population. So they're great, and it's a great space to be in. We just started the past few months, but so far I've learned a lot and been able to get our voices heard. So
wow,
yeah,
you are involved in so many organizations. How do you have time for school?
I would say that school is a mistake. So I love learning, but I love the school of life more. There's this one quote. I read this book called Weapons of Mass Instruction. My godmother recommended it to me, but I never want to let my education get in the way of my learning. I just finished exams, so I have to learn how to prioritize, especially going into senior year, college applications. It's all a lot, but I think this is always something that comes really naturally to me because I'm passionate about it. And I've really found a way that I'm able to use my voice. Like I love speaking, I love writing, I love films. So just doing something that it doesn't have to be forced. And I don't know, it's fun. Like these conversations are very fun. So that's
wonderful. You've shared a lot of amazing things that you're doing. Now you've chosen one particular climate action, what is that action?
I would say, okay, so I said my climate action is speaking up. And I think that for me happens anywhere. In class, if I'm seeing my brother throw away a plastic bottle on the side of a road, and sometimes even on protests, if I want to just go out with my friends and just, speak up about a certain thing that happened, a certain policy that was passed, just showing up, being there, showing that, when people think that it doesn't actually matter, we're there actually reminding them that this policy, these climate events actually affect people. So I think that's my little climate action, showing up, being there, speaking up.
For those who are listening to the podcast and not seeing you, I will just tell our listeners that you have this vibrancy and this enthusiasm that is amazing. What gives you this hope for the future?
I think the people that give me the most hope, the young people or anyone in general, who, regardless of their circumstance, still shows up and still puts in the work that is required to make sure that this happens. I've seen people in the worst living conditions having the toughest time, but they still have that optimism to show up and do their thing regardless. If you see how there's so much innovation in human nature, and I've seen people who are standing on the road, or market women, or fishermen, just different community, even young kids who sell food on the road, just the way that they use what they are given, the resources that they have to create something that's what as much as gold. And if we put and channel that creativity that we have, that sets us apart from any other species, I know that we would be able to use that innovation and just do something amazing. So I'm just so hopeful for what is to come, and just for the people who are putting themselves out of the hard situations to fight for something else, fight for a future for everyone. And I don't know, they give me a lot of hope.
Your hope and your enthusiasm is contagious, which leads me to believe that you are going to be a leader in the future. I will look forward to hearing about what you do in Nigeria. And thank you so much for taking time to join us today, Amara.
Thank you, Fran. It's just been a pleasure.
And thank you, dear listener. If you are intrigued by what you heard today, take a second to think about who else in your life would like to hear Amara's story, and please share this episode with them. Heck, share the whole podcast with them. It makes a great Christmas gift. These are young people whose voices should be heard, and we are going to take a break for a few weeks, but we'll be back with more of those voices later in January to talk with another climate action figure who was involved in COP29. Until then,
QuickFix. Wrong word. Go figures. Go figures.
This has been Climate Action Figures. Our show is produced and hosted by John Whidden. Our creative consultant is Kayla McIntosh. Our theme song is Hawaii Vacation by Tavari. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Climate Action Figures. That's all one word. And if you have any other questions or comments that arose from this or any episode, feel free to reach out to us at climateactionfigures@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another Climate Action Figure.